Hi everyone, I hope that you are all well. Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back, and to those who are new, thanks for checking out my channel. Please hit subscribe and stick around. For today's Mondays with Margaret, this is episode number 5, I think. We're going to take a look at the Journals of Susanna Moody. Now, my edition is the illustrated Journals of Susanna Moody. And if you've been following along, then you know that earlier in this series we talked about Margaret Atwood's longtime friend Charles Pachter, who has illustrated several of Margaret Atwood's poems, and this is another example of their collaboration. So in this video I'm going to talk about who Susanna Moody is, some of the poems in this collection, and the collaboration with Charles Pachter. And then if you stick around until the end, I'm going to be letting you know the next, I think it's the next 5 books in the Mondays with Margaret's schedule, which will be for March. So when I saw the Journals of Susanna Moody on Margaret Atwood's book list, and then I looked it up, I realized that there really are journals from a person named Susanna Moody. So I didn't know anything about Susanna Moody before this. So when I put it on our list to read for this series, I thought I better learn at least a little bit about her. And as I learned about Susanna Moody, I at first was a bit surprised that Margaret Atwood would want to write something about her. I will say there's tension, because Susanna Moody calls herself one of the first pioneers of Canada, and really, we are all settlers, and in her journal she wrote about her experience of coming to Canada from England in 1832 and really hating it. She writes of herself as being from respectable connections, and that living in the bush near Cobourg, Ontario, which is north of Toronto, was very difficult for her. So Moody was a writer of children's stories, and she wrote 2 autobiographical books where she talks of her new environment. And she saw these writings as a help to those who were considering doing something similar to what the Moody family did. And she wanted to tell them the truth. And others might read those books as kind of knocking Canada and its land. And it's not until her second book that she talks more about finding peace in Canada. So Margaret Atwood found her 2 novels to be disappointing, and she had a dream of Susanna Moody, and in the dream she was writing a play for her, and Susanna Moody began to haunt her. And what kept bringing her back was what was not said in the journals, and so Atwood began these poems that were published in 1970, and they were more as a meditation on Susanna's life and on nature's relationship with animals and humans, and on human dislocation. So I also think that there are some links to Susanna's life and Margaret's life. They're both writers. Margaret grew up in the bush and was also drawn to literature. But from what I can tell, Margaret enjoyed being in nature, and this wasn't seen as a hardship for her. So I think Susanna's story would be appealing to her in that way. Margaret would be able to fill in the holes that Susanna Moody couldn't put into words in a way that maybe nobody else could. So the Journals of Susanna Moody by Margaret Atwood is divided into 3 parts. Journal 1 is from 1832 to 1840, and this is the time period of the Moody's arrival in Canada to their departure from the bush for Belleville. Journal 2 is from 1840 to 1871, which is their years in Belleville. And Journal 3 is from 1871 to 1969, and this is Susanna's old age, death, and beyond. In Atwood's poems, she comes to the present just before these poems were published, making an appearance on a Toronto bus, and she becomes the spirit of the land that she once hated. So I'd like to share a couple of poems from each of the sections, and then I will talk about the illustrations as well. So in the first journal, I'm going to read, it's called The 2 Fires. And I love this poem because it speaks of having something consistent, in this case fire, but that there is a time and place for it that changes. And I think we've all enjoyed a bonfire, making s'mores or roasting wieners. There's also something to be said about a nice fire on an autumn day or winter day, when it's cold in the evening, and that's the season we're in now. But both have, different feelings, and both bring comfort, but both also bring danger in their own way. And I think in Atwood's poem, it seems like Susanna's had some bad experiences with fire, and she's tried to remove herself from it. So this is called The Two Fires. 1. The summer fire outside, the trees melting, returning to their first red elements on all sides, cutting me off from escape or the saving lake. I sat in the house, raised up between that shapeless raging and my sleeping children a charm. Concentrate on form, geometry, the human architecture of the house, square closed doors, proved roof beams, the logic of windows. The children could not be wakened. In their calm dreaming, the trees were straight and still, had branches and were green. The other, the winter fire inside, the protective roof shriveling overhead, the rafters incandescent, all those corners and straight lines flaming, the carefully made structure prisoning us in a cage of blazing bars. The children were awake and crying. I wrapped them, carried them outside into the snow. Then I tried to rescue what was left of their scorched dream about the house. Blankets, warm clothes, the singed furniture of safety cast away with them in a white chaos. Two fires informed me. Each refuge fails us. Each danger becomes a haven. Left charred marks, now on which I try to grow. I really liked that one. The second poem I want to read from this section is called Departure from the Bush. And to me, it's almost like in this one, Susanna knew that nature wanted her to be part of nature, to live interconnected with nature and the animals. And the animals kind of got more used to her, but it seems like she never got used to the nature and the animals. And the end of the poem basically says that she knows that she was supposed to learn something, but that she never did. So, Departure from the Bush. I, who had been erased by fire, was crept in upon by green, how lucid a season. In time the animals arrived to inhabit me, first one by one, stealthily, their habitual traces burnt. Then, having marked new boundaries, returning, more confident, year by year, 2 by 2. But restless, I was not ready altogether to be moved into. They could tell I was too heavy, I might capsize. I was frightened by their eyes, green or amber, glowing out from inside me. I was not completed. At night, I could not see without lanterns. He wrote, "We are leaving." I said, "I have no clothes left I can wear." The snow came. The sleigh was a relief. Its track lengthened behind, pushing me towards the city, and rounding the first hill, I was instantaneous, unlived in. They had gone. There was something they almost taught me. I came away not having learned. From the second journal, I'm going to read Dream 2. It's called Brian the Still Hunter. And my guess about this poem is that this was someone that Susanna knew and still dreams about. It also shows how nature overtakes Brian, and he lets it, whereas from the last poem, we know that Susanna did not. Dream 2, Brian the Still Hunter. The man I saw in the forest used to come to our house every morning, never said anything. I learned from the neighbors later he once tried to cut his throat. I found him at the end of the path, sitting on a fallen tree, cleaning his gun. There was no wind. Around us the leaves rustled. He said to me, "I kill because I have to. But every time I aim, I feel my skin grow fur, my head heavy with antlers. And during the stretched instant the bullet glides on its thread of speed, my soul runs innocent as whose. Is God just to his creatures? I die more often than many." He looked up and I saw the white scar made by the hunting knife around his neck. When I woke, I remembered. He has been gone 20 years and not heard from. So there's also a ghostly quality to that. I really like that one. Kirivari, I thought was also an interesting poem. It is a folk custom, and they do like a mock parade or a mock serenade. And Susanna would have been around and would have seen different cultures and customs where she lived. And I'm guessing some would have been from Indigenous peoples. And what I think that this poem is about is it takes place in the note at the end of the poem. And it says that Canadians, we have to acknowledge the victims and murders that have taken place on the land that we're now on. So this is Kirivari. They capped their heads with feathers, masked their faces, wore their clothes backwards, howled with torches through the midnight winter, and dragged the black man from his house to the jolting music of broken instruments, pretending to each other. It was a joke until they killed him. I don't know what happened to the white bride. The American lady, adding she thought it was a disgraceful piece of business, finished her tea. Note: never pretend this isn't part of the soil, too. Tea drinkers and inadvertent victims and murderers, when we come this way again, in other forms, take care to look behind, within where the skeleton face beneath the face puts on its feather mask. The arm within the arm lifts up the spear. Resist those cracked drumbeats. Stop this. Become human. From the third journal, Atwood writes about Susanna aging, and I'm going to share a poem from that called Wish, Metamorphosis to Heraldic Emblem. I balance myself carefully inside my shrinking body, which is nevertheless deceptive as a cat's fur. When I am dipped in the earth, I will be much smaller. On my skin, the wrinkles branch out, overlapping like hair or feathers. In this parlor, my grandchildren, uneasy on Sunday chairs with my deafness, my cameo brooch, my puckered mind, scurrying in its old burrows, little guess how, maybe, I will prowl and slink in crystal darkness among the stalactite roots with new-formed plumage, uncorroded, gold and fiery green, my fingers curved and scaled, my opal no eyes glowing. And the last poem that I want to share, Margaret writes it as though we hear Susanna's voice from the grave. It's called Thoughts from Underground. When I first reached this country, I hated it, and I hated it more each year. In summer, the light a violent blur, the heat thick as a swamp, the green things fiercely shoving themselves upwards, the eyelids bitten by insects. In winter, our teeth were brittle with cold. We fed on squirrels. At night, the house cracked. In the mornings, we thawed the bad bread over the stove. Then we were made successful, and I felt I ought to love this country. I said I loved it, and my mind saw double. I began to forget myself in the middle of sentences. Events were split apart. I fought. I constructed desperate paragraphs of praise. Everyone ought to love it because, and set them up at intervals. Due to natural resources, native industry, superior penitentiaries, we will all be rich and powerful. Flat as highway billboards. Who can doubt it? Look how fast Belleville is growing, though it is still no place for an English gentleman. I think that last line in that one is a bit of Margaret Atwood's humor coming out. So I'd like to show you some of the illustrations from Charles Pachter. If you watch the video about speeches for Dr. Frankenstein, I talked about the relationship between Margaret and Charles, and I showed how he created some of those sketches, and these look a bit similar. In this case, there were 120 books published, not 15 like speeches for Dr. Frankenstein. And I will leave a link in the description of a video of Margaret and Charles talking about this collection and the process of creating these illustrations and the book itself. Try and find it. This one kind of gives me, it's a little bit spooky. You can see that. There's some that are very powerful as well. He definitely, this is the Two Fires illustration. It's like she's split in half. Let me find another one. There was also a poem called Death of a Young Son by Drowning. So I don't know if they actually had a son drown. And if that was an experience, that would have been a reason to not like where they were living. Here's one for the Charivari. So you can see that. Yeah, there's this one. I thought it was an interesting picture. That's for the another one that's about her old age. I like that that's included. For those following along and want to know what we will be reading, the schedule is in the description below. We have it up until the end of February, but today I am going to share the books that we will be reading in March. So if there are specific books that you want to either purchase or get from the library, then you'll know when we'll be reading them. So we start March off on March 1st with a novel called Bodily Harm. This was published in 1981. Then on March 8th, we will be doing another collection of poetry called True Stories. This was also published in 1981. Then there's a nonfiction book on March 15th called Second Words. This was published in 1982. And the final two books were published in 1983. On March 22nd, we will be reading short fiction called Murder in the Dark. And to finish off the month, on March 29th, we will be reading short fiction called Bluebeard's Egg. So Margaret did have two other books published in 1983. If you look at her website, you'll see the list. One is Unearthing Suite, which is over $400, so we aren't going to be doing that one. And Snake Poems, which is a collection of poetry, is very difficult to find. I haven't been able to find it, so we'll be doing some poems from that when we get to Selected Poems 2, which is sometime in April. Let me know if you have any questions about that. Please let me know if you had any favorite poems from the Journals of Susanna Moody, or maybe you know more information about Susanna Moody. That would be interesting to know. I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Thanks for watching, have a fantastic day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.